Okay, so we're diving deep into essentialism with Greg McKeown's book, doing less but better. And I have to admit, this concept, it really resonated with me. It's like that feeling you get when your to-do list is a mile long, but you're not actually making progress on the things that truly matter.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that trap.
Right.
McKeown calls it the paradox of success.
Mm,
You start with a really clear vision, you achieve some wins, and then suddenly you're bombarded with opportunities.
right.
And it's almost like success itself becomes the obstacle.
It's so true. You feel like you have to say yes to everything because each opportunity just seems too good to pass up. Like I remember when I first started freelancing, I took on every single project that came my way.
Oh, yeah.
I was making good money, don't get me wrong, but I felt completely burned out.
That's a classic example of the paradox in action. So McKeown breaks it down into 4 phases. Phase 1 is that initial stage of clarity and focus.
Okay.
That leads to that early success, right? But that success, it breeds more options,
Oh.
and we kind of get caught up in the excitement of it all.
Yeah.
And we feel this like almost obligation to say yes to everything. And that leads to phase 3, which is where we start spreading ourselves too thin.
It's like being on that hamster wheel of productivity, working harder, but not necessarily smarter.
Exactly.
And then in the end, we reach phase 4 where we've kind of lost sight of what truly mattered in the first place.
Yeah, you become so busy being busy that you forget why you even started in the first place.
Exactly.
So it becomes this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
But what I find so empowering about essentialism is this emphasis on choice.
Oh, okay.
We have the power to decide what we want to focus on.
Right.
And that starts with recognizing that saying no to one thing means saying yes to something else.
That reminds me of Greg McKeown's personal story. He was halfway through law school when he realized it wasn't his true calling.
Wow.
Talk about a tough choice to walk away from something that you've already invested so much time and energy in.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect example of the courage it takes to live an essentialist life.
Yeah.
He chose to focus on what he truly valued, even if it meant, deviating from that expected path. It reminds me of Warren Buffett's investment strategy. He's incredibly selective, focusing on a few key investments rather than chasing every trend.
It's about quality over quantity.
Yes.
Right. That reminds me of another example from the book Southwest Airlines.
Okay.
They've made some really unconventional choices, like not serving meals on their flights,
Right.
to stay true to their core value of being a low-cost airline.
And it's worked because they're not trying to be everything to everyone.
Yeah.
They've made these strategic trade-offs to maintain their focus. But with this great choice comes the responsibility of deciding what not to do.
Right.
This is where making those strategic trade-offs becomes crucial
Oh, totally.
and can sometimes be even harder
Yeah.
than choosing what to focus on.
It's so true, and it can be tough.
Right.
I think that's why the story about the couple who decide not to join any social clubs just so they could spend more time with their children
Yeah.
really struck a chord with me.
It's such a powerful example of how these principles apply to our personal lives, too.
Totally.
It's about consciously choosing how we spend our time and energy, even when it means saying no to things that sound fun
Yeah,
or interesting. Because ultimately, it's about aligning our actions with our values.
absolutely. And that alignment is so key to that less but better philosophy.
Yes.
That's at the core of essentialism. Have you noticed how sometimes you actually get more accomplished on those days when you're really focused on just a few crucial tasks?
You're describing the Pareto principle in action.
Okay, what's that?
It states that roughly 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts.
Wow.
The key is identifying that crucial 20%
Okay.
and giving it your all.
I love that. It makes you think about all the things we do that might feel productive but don't actually move the needle. We've got to learn to discern those trivial many from the vital few.
Exactly.
Speaking of maximizing output, that study on violinists really got me thinking.
Okay.
So the best ones, unsurprisingly, practiced a lot, but sleep.
Right.
Good quality sleep was the second most important factor in their skill level.
Isn't that fascinating? Even in areas where we think more effort is always better,
Right.
rest and strategic renewal are essential for maximizing results.
That definitely makes me want to prioritize sleep a little more.
Me too.
It's like creating that space for your brain to recharge and process information.
Exactly. And it's not just about sleep.
Yeah.
It's about creating space for focus
Okay.
in a world that's constantly vying for our attention.
Right.
Remember that story about the executive who went to a motel with no internet just to finish a project? He had to create that physical and mental space to do his best work.
Okay, I'll admit that one seemed a little extreme to me. I'm not sure my boss would go for that. But it does highlight how difficult it can be to find true focus in our hyper-connected world. It's like our brains are constantly being bombarded with notifications and distractions.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on finding that space for focus
Sure.
in a more practical, everyday way?
It's about setting those boundaries
Yeah.
and creating the space for deep, focused work.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much more we can accomplish when we're not constantly switching between tasks.
Right, like giving your brain permission to slow down
Yes,
and focus on one thing at a time.
exactly.
And that reminds me of another tool that McKeown talks about for gaining clarity and identifying those essential priorities. Journaling.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was a bit skeptical at first.
Really?
But once I started journaling consistently, I was surprised by how much it helped me process my thoughts
Sure.
and make better decisions.
It's such a simple yet powerful practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the key is consistency, as Malcolm Gladwell suggests.
Right.
Even if it's just writing a few sentences each day,
Yeah.
it's about building that habit, that space for reflection.
Yeah.
Journaling can help us sift through all that noise
Right.
and identify those nagging thoughts or those brilliant ideas
Yeah.
that we might otherwise miss.
It's like that feeling when you finally write something down
Yeah.
that's been swirling around in your head for days.
Right.
And suddenly it's on paper and you can actually start to process it
Yes.
and move forward.
Exactly. It brings that thought into focus. And once we have that clarity, it becomes easier to start uncommitting from the non-essentials,
Okay.
which, let's be honest, can be a challenge.
It's so true. It's like we're hardwired to avoid that feeling of missing out,
Right.
even if it's something we don't truly care about. I remember reading about the Concorde jet,
Oh, yeah.
a marvel of engineering,
Yeah.
but a financial disaster.
The sunk cost bias
Yeah.
kept governments pouring money into it,
Oh!
even when it was clear it wasn't sustainable.
It's so true. We laugh, but haven't we all been there? Sticking with a project or a commitment simply because we've already invested so much time and energy,
Right.
even if our gut is telling us to walk away.
It's incredibly common. It might be clinging to a dead-end job, a relationship that's run its course.
Right.
We're afraid of that unknown, of starting over.
Yeah.
But McKeown, he offers this great strategy called the reverse pilot.
Okay.
Imagine temporarily removing that activity
Okay.
or commitment from your life.
Right.
What if you said no to that next meeting that you just know is going to be a waste of time? What if you took a break from that side project that's been draining your energy? You might just discover that you're better off without it.
It's a brilliant way to challenge those assumptions
Yeah.
and see what happens when you create that space. And it ties into the idea of starting small, which really resonated with me.
Okay.
We often get so overwhelmed by the enormity of our goals.
Yeah.
What if we focused on making these tiny, incremental progress each day?
Like those fundraising thermometers we
Yeah.
had in elementary school.
Exactly.
Every small donation brought us closer to the goal.
Right.
And it felt amazing to color in that thermometer a little bit more each day.
It's that visual representation of progress that can be so motivating.
Exactly.
And it's a great reminder that even small wins, they build momentum.
Yes.
Remember how the book talks about Pixar's iterative process
Oh, yeah.
for filmmaking?
Starting with a rough draft
Yes.
and then refining and improving upon it through countless iterations.
It just goes to show that even the most incredible creations start with small, imperfect steps.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's about embracing the process,
Yeah.
not getting bogged down by the pursuit of perfection from day one.
Right.
And once we've identified those essential actions, those small steps that move us closer to our larger goals,
Right.
that's where routines and rituals can be incredibly helpful.
I'm thinking of that section about Michael Phelps and his pre-race routine.
Oh, yeah.
It was incredibly detailed, right down to the way he stepped onto the starting block.
Every single movement was deliberate, designed to put him in that optimal mental and physical state for peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
And while not all of us need a routine that's quite so meticulous, there's a lot we can learn from the way these elite athletes approach their craft.
It's fascinating how those routines work, almost like programming our brains for success.
It is.
What's the science behind that?
It all comes down to neuroplasticity.
Okay.
Every time we repeat an action, we strengthen the neural pathways associated with that action,
Right.
making it more automatic over time.
So routines are like creating these mental shortcuts
Yes.
for those essential activities,
That's-
freeing up our mental bandwidth for other tasks.
Precisely. It's like putting your brain on autopilot for those routine tasks. Think about something as simple as making your bed each morning.
It seems so trivial, right?
but it sets the tone for the day.
Okay.
It creates a sense of order and accomplishment, even before you've tackled the bigger tasks on your to-do list.
So like those dominoes all lined up, right?
Mm.
That one small action, it can trigger this chain reaction
Yes.
of positive habits and behaviors throughout your day.
Exactly. And the best part is we can apply this principle of routine to any area of our lives.
Right.
Whether it's like a morning ritual to kind of set your intentions for the day,
Right.
or a dedicated workflow to maximize focus,
Yeah.
or even just an evening wind down to promote better sleep.
Right.
Routines help us cultivate those habits
Yeah.
that lead to a more intentional and fulfilling life.
It's about designing your life rather than letting life just happen to you.
Exactly.
And that reminds me of the concept of invisible scripts that he
Yes.
talks about in the book.
Right.
It's so easy to get caught up in those shoulds of life.
Oh, yeah.
The shoulds that are often dictated by societal expectations
Yeah.
or our own ingrained beliefs about how things are supposed to be.
And those scripts can be so subtle,
Right.
so ingrained that we don't even realize they're really dictating our choices.
Totally.
McKeown talks about how he almost didn't even apply to Stanford
Really?
because it felt too narrow, too singular a focus.
Wow, but it turned out to be the perfect environment for him.
Exactly. Challenging those invisible scripts requires us to kind of examine our beliefs and ask ourselves, what do I truly value? It's about having that courage to define success
Right.
on our own terms.
Right.
I'm reminded of Gandhi,
Oh, wow.
his incredible commitment to simplicity and purpose.
Imagine reducing your possessions to like fewer than 10 items.
Right.
Talk about embracing the essential.
It's a powerful example of how focusing on the vital few can lead to a life of extraordinary impact.
It's inspiring to think about how we can apply those principles in our own lives, even on a smaller scale.
Absolutely.
We don't all have to become minimalists or anything,
Right.
but we can all benefit from being more intentional
Yes.
about what we choose to focus on,
Sure.
both in our personal and professional lives.
Absolutely. It's about making conscious choices about how we spend our time,
Yes.
our energy, and our attention.
Right.
And it's about being willing to let go of the things that are no longer serving us, even if it feels counterintuitive.
It's hard to let go sometimes.
It is.
But it's so freeing when you do.
It is. And that reminds me of another key principle of essentialism, living in the now.
Okay.
It's so easy to get caught up in regrets about the past, anxieties about the future.
Right.
But McKeown argues that true presence, true intentionality, comes from being fully engaged in this present moment.
So it's about being present and engaged in what's happening right now,
Yes.
rather than dwelling on the, what ifs and should haves.
Exactly. He gives that great example of feeling overwhelmed after a really busy day of teaching.
Okay.
And instead of panicking, he just asked himself, what's important now?
Mm.
It's a powerful reminder that we can't do everything at once,
Right.
but we can choose to focus on what's essential in this very moment.
That's such a powerful reframe. It's about shifting our perspective from feeling overwhelmed to feeling empowered to choose.
Yes.
But how do we actually cultivate that living in the now mindset
Sure.
in our fast-paced, multitasking world?
It starts with awareness.
Okay.
Pay attention to your thoughts. Are you constantly kind of replaying past events?
Yeah.
Or worrying about those future possibilities? If so, gently guide your attention back to the present moment.
Okay.
Focus on your senses.
Right.
What do you see, hear, smell, taste, and feel? These sensory experiences can be really powerful anchors to the present moment.
It's like hitting the reset button on your brain
Yes.
and reconnecting with your surroundings.
Exactly. It takes practice.
Right.
But over time, it becomes easier to catch yourself in those moments of distraction
Yeah.
and gently redirect your attention to the present.
Right.
And the benefits are incredible.
Right.
When we're present, we're more focused, more creative,
Right.
more appreciative of those little things,
Yeah.
and more connected to the world around us.
It's about savoring those moments rather than letting them pass us by in a blur of to-dos and worries. And ultimately, I think that's what essentialism is all about, isn't it? It's about creating a life that's both meaningful and joyful, a life that's aligned with our values and priorities,
Absolutely.
a life that's lived with intention and purpose.
Beautifully said.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive
Yes.
into the world of essentialism. I always love exploring these ideas with you.
Me too. It's so fun.
And I hope our listeners will join us next time as we continue to uncover practical tips and insights for living a more intentional and fulfilling life. Thanks for being here.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.